Once again, good afternoon. My name is Mike Padilla. I'm a project manager with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and I would like to welcome you here today for us to give you a briefing on the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study and to ask for your input on the public shared vision. We're talking about an endeavor here that's going to go on for several years. In order to guide us on our way, it's always good to have a shared vision, and it's good to have everybody contribute to that, everybody that's involved with the study. And hopefully you all, the public will be involved with this study. And so we'd like to get your input. A couple of things before we get started. I wanted to make sure everybody knew that the meeting is being recorded and it will be available on our study website. And that can be found at www.lrd, Lakes and Rivers Division, LRD.usace, USACE, which is U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, .army.mil, that's MIL, /GLCRS. And we'll give you a QAR code to click on for that as well. But this recording will be available there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So this is the first of many outreach and partnering opportunities that will occur over the next few years as this study takes shape and moves forward toward a collaborative conclusion. It's all about resiliency, being able to withstand things that occur in Mother Nature. Everybody is concerned about climate change and things like that. And so we're trying to be proactive to think ahead a little bit, to try to be ready for things that may occur. And we want you to help us with that. In order for everybody to participate, we have a few features here with the Zoom meeting that you'll be able to take advantage of. And I would like to introduce you to Dr. Akila Martin, who will tell you a little bit about some of those Zoom features. Akila.
Yes, thank you so much, Mike. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for sharing space with us today. I am Dr. Akila Martin, daughter to Laurel and James Martin, and today I am serving as facilitator for the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, Shared Vision Public Meetings, along with my co-host, Madeline Dewey, who is a planner at the Buffalo District of USACE, and you will see Madeline posting feverishly in the chat, so please pay attention to the chat as much as you can for any links or any information sharing. All right, I wanted to take this time to talk about the Zoom platform that we're using today and also thank Argonne National Laboratory for providing this platform for us to use for these meetings. So thank you so much, Argonne. We really appreciate you partnering with us. All right, if everyone can turn their gaze downward to the bottom of their screen in the Zoom platform. If you are in the video platform, please do. There are a few things we'd like to call your attention to. So the first thing is the Q&A functionality in Zoom. It should be represented by a Q and A, and then two call out figures right on top of the Q&A. We would love and encourage and invite you to use that functionality to ask any questions. You can send us a question privately, anonymously, or however you feel appropriate. Please do not put any questions in the chat because they may get lost and we may not see them. So we would further encourage you to use the Q&A functionality for any questions. Now, if you have any input or feedback, things of that nature, any comments, please use the chat feature. And that feature is to the right of the Q&A. It says chat with the call out button on top. And you can write in there, in the chat, any of your comments or input or feedback. Next and final is the show captions. So say you want to view a transcript of what's being stated verbally and orally today, you can click on show captions and it has a CC and a call out button right atop show captions. Click on that and you will be able to see the transcript. Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome again, and we look forward to sharing space with you over the duration of this meeting. And welcome, Mike, back to the stage to go over the agenda.
Thanks, Akila. So yeah, folks, one thing I should have mentioned right at the top here is that this meeting is being co-hosted by the state of New York, and they'll be having a few remarks in just a minute. They'll introduce themselves. So the agenda for today really is just a welcome here. We're going to do an icebreaker exercise that has to do with the Great Lakes that you may find interesting. Once we do that, the state of New York will make some remarks, and they'll actually do a presentation about their mission and their organization. I'll tell you a little bit more about that and how they cooperate and collaborate with us on this study. After the state of New York's remarks, then the Corps of Engineers will come back and make a presentation about the study, the background and scope of the study, the shared vision statement, and we're really here today to talk about the shared vision. We'll talk about some major study products that will come out of this study, and the basin-wide analysis, which is the very bedrock of this study to do an analysis basin-wide of all the resources that are there and vulnerabilities of those resources. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers using that protocol that Dr. Martin just mentioned a minute ago. And then we'll have some closing remarks and talk a little bit about the next steps of the study. So we really appreciate you being here today. The state of New York is a cost share partner with this, and we really appreciate them helping with us with the study. We couldn't really do it without them because of, they're a very important Great Lakes state. So as we go along, we will be introducing you to some of the key members of our project delivery team, and we'll be walking through some of the technical scope elements and talk about timelines and things like that. After this briefing, we're really looking forward to your direct feedback and input, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers, as I mentioned before. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Martin. She's going to tell you a little bit about the touchstones and some of the meeting expectations here for today's meeting. Akila.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate you turning it back over to me. So thank you, everyone, and welcome yet again. I'd like to share a few things we'd like to share with you, our shared expectations that we'd like to have for the flow of our duration of the meeting today, and how we'd like to share space. And so I'll go through them one by one. And if you do have any comments or input, definitely feel free to put in the chat. If you have questions, definitely use the Q&A functionality. All right, so we want you to be 100% present, prepared, extending, and presuming welcome. We welcome you. We thank you for sharing space with us. We welcome you to ask questions. We welcome your feedback and your input. To limit any distractions, turn off, mute your cell phones or any computer, laptop, tablet things, so as to make sure you're able to hear everything that we're saying and hear what other participants are saying. We want you to be aware of and allow for the difference between intention and impact. We'd love for you to listen deeply and always by invitation. Right? We're always inviting you to ask questions, to provide feedback. So thank you so much for that. We'd like for you to identify any assumptions, and then if you do identify any of those, suspend judgment. If you do have an opportunity to speak aloud, please limit your time to 1.5 minutes so as to allow others to be able to speak as well. At any time, speak your truth, whether that's in written form and or verbal form. And if things get difficult, turn to wonder, knowing that you are making a significant contribution. And we want to emphasize today to expect non-closure, because we may not be able to answer all questions or acknowledge all comments. We may not be that far in the study enough to answer that, but please know that the team is working diligently to get to those answers. And then finally, keep the meeting moving forward and focused on the meeting purpose. And we thank you so much for adhering to these shared expectations and meeting touchstones. All right, I want to emphasize one more time for the questions and comments. So we will have a dedicated time later in the meeting for questions and answers. But during that time, you may have questions throughout. So please feel free to use the Q&A functionality in Zoom as shown on the screen. For those that are in the video platform, there's a Q&A function. Click that. As I said earlier, you can send us a direct message as well, which I didn't say, I'm saying it now. You can send myself, Akila Martin, and or Madeline Dewey a direct message if you'd like to stay anonymous. But you can also send a Q&A, a question anonymously or privately, as well as a comment. Use the chat feature for any feedback, for any input, for any comments. And we welcome you and thank you so much for sharing space with us today. Over to you, Mike. Hey, Mike, you may be on mute.
Sorry about that. I thought I had that unmuted. But so the Corps of Engineers, we have a mission, water resource mission within our civil works mission, and really across the nation. There are many, many, many facilities that we administer to. And as you can imagine, we think about resiliency a lot because those facilities need to withstand, things that occur, weather events, things like that. And so the course thought a lot about resiliency, and we came up with a definition: the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing conditions, and to withstand, respond to, and recover rapidly from disruptions. And we see resiliency as kind of a cycle here. And the cycle is shown here in this graphic. Our resilient principles are prepare, absorb, recover, and adapt. And as you can imagine, preparing for is, the things that you need to do to be ready for before an event occurs, and during and immediately after a disruption. Preparation is all about planning, training, putting in protections in place to help to withstand an event. Absorb, to be able to endure the disruption with minimal damage and without losing normal functionality, to absorb that event. Recover after the event is done, quickly return to functionality. Um, Recovering probably is going to involve rebuilding and rebuilding in ways that allow for less damage from similar events in the future. And then adapt. Make changes that you need to based on what's occurred. Make changes that reduce negative impacts in the future. And this is a cycle, and that continues on, and hopefully allows for continual improvement. So this is the kind of the concept the Corps of Engineers has for resiliency. And I would also like to ask about what resiliency means to you. And so we'd like to do this little exercise quickly here. And to do that, I'd like to turn it back over to Akila. Akila?
Yes, thanks so much, Mike. Hey, everyone. So we'd like to engage you with an activity on what does coastal resiliency mean to you? And so we have activated the Poll Everywhere platform. And so there are three ways that you can participate in this activity. One is using the QR code. If you're looking on the screen at the bottom left, there is a square with some stuff on it. It's a QR screen. So take your phone camera and scan that. It'll take you right to the website. All right. You can also go directly to the website, which I'll call out, or you can use your mobile phone texting feature to text your response. So I'll first go over the website link. And it's also in a chat. Thank you, Madeline, for posting that. So you can click on that whenever you're ready. It is PollEv, so that's for Poll Everywhere, shortened to Poll, POLLEV. So pollev.com/choice guru 975. And that's the word choice, CHOICE, the word guru, GURU, and then the numbers 975. Once again, that website is pollev.com/choice guru 975. So as I said, you can use your phone's camera to scan the QR code. You can use the link we just posted and I just stated. And the final way you can participate is to text this phone number, 22333. So I'll say that one more time. The phone number is 22333. And then once you have that in the number field, and when you're ready to type into the message part of your text, you will put in Choice Guru 975. So that's the word choice, the word guru, and the numbers 975. And then whatever words, phrases, statements, or sentences you'd like to share to your response of what does coastal resiliency mean to you. So once again, you can scan the QR code on the screen. You can click on the link that's in the chat to pollev.com, or you can text your response to 22333. All right, I will share my screen so you all can see the word cloud that you are developing with your responses. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. So thank you all for participating so far. Please know that you can participate throughout the duration of this meeting. You can participate multiple times. So if you have several words, several phrases, several statements, several sentences, please feel free to share over and over and over again. Now, a little bit about what a word cloud is. So as you can see, the words are changing, right? You can see them moving, shifting. And what happens is that words that are more frequently used or input into this poll, they will come more alive. They will be larger in text. So as you can see, the word ability, dynamic, ecosystems, conditions, coastal, those words appear to be being used frequently, right? And so they're going to appear larger. And that's okay. We appreciate that. Keep participating to the best of your ability for however long you want for the duration of this meeting. We appreciate any and all responses. And I want to say once again, thank you for telling us what coastal resiliency means to you. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I will turn it back over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Akila. So when we started to partner with the Great Lakes states, we talked about resiliency and what it means to our to the study, and we came up with some ideas here using the who, what, when, where, why, and how. When we talk about resiliency, the who is really the communities and the creatures and really habitat infrastructure, the recreation areas. This is what we're talking about. The who, basically the people. And what about resiliency? Variable water levels and ice conditions under a range of possible climate change scenarios. In other words, we're looking to the future. We're looking at climate change. We're looking at what is within the range of possibility for scenarios of climate as we go forward. When we talk about when, it's both the short term and the long term. The short term, we need to understand what's happening and observe. But when we plan ahead and we start to think about making investments and things like that, we need to know the long term. And so we're trying to look farther ahead, for resiliency and be proactive. That's the easy part. It's the Great Lakes coasts of the United States. It does not include Canada. However, I wanted to, which probably makes sense to everybody, that this is a USA funded study working with the U.S. states, and so the work really has to do with the United States. However, I wanted to make sure that you knew that we are collaborating and cooperating with Canada in terms of the modeling that we're doing and other data and things like that. So when we won't really be analyzing Canada as part of this and resiliency for Canada, we will be working with them and supplying them with modeling information and other data and things like that. So, why are we doing this? What's out there that needs to be resilient? That's the biggest part of this, and that's why we have a star there. We really need your help with this, and we hope to update that why part of it based on what we get today when we talk about the shared vision. But in general, we're really talking about the economic, environmental, and social value of the Great Lakes coast, and that covers a lot of things, but we want to make sure that we really do have an understanding of the things, why we're doing this. And when it comes to the how, a big part of this is when we're looking forward and trying to be proactive, we have to promote shared responsibility that, we're all in this together to be prepared for what's happening in the future. And hopefully we can, get at this by identifying a range of actions that we could potentially do to be proactive and to help with resiliency, and also to guide regional investment going into the future. So it's sometimes interesting to do these kind of question and answer sort of things. And so hopefully that gives you an idea of how we think about the resiliency. Next slide, please. I was going to turn it over back to Dr. Martin. She will introduce you to some of the folks from the state of New York.
Yes, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that. So now I would like to welcome to the stage Deputy Secretary of State for Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure, Keisha Santiago, and Michael Snyder, Ocean and Great Lakes Division Director, for their remarks for the state of New York and the state of New York's presentation. So welcome, Deputy Secretary Keisha Santiago.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. Welcome to the New York Focus public meeting for the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study. My name is Keisha Santiago, and I am, in fact, the Deputy Secretary of New York's Department of State. I lead the Office of Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure. In our office, we undertake planning for specialized areas that lead to the vibrancy of a whole community, whether on the coast, in a downtown, or in transportation corridors. In so many ways, New York's diversity is one of its defining characteristics. This is no different on our coast. New York's Great Lakes region includes large urban areas like Buffalo and Rochester, farmlands and orchards, extensive tourism areas like the Thousand Islands region, and world-famous Niagara Falls. As communities along our Great Lakes shorelines know all too well, the vibrancy of these areas are under constant stress. As our lakes change around us, we are forced to deal with the unprecedented high water levels, years with little or no winter ice cover, and storms that make once-in-a-generation events feel all too common. The urgency is real. 7 years ago, our Lake Ontario, Lower Niagara, and St. Lawrence communities were devastated by record high water levels. And only 2 years later, those new records were broken again by high water that again flooded communities. Along Lake Erie, a record-setting blizzard last year and frequent SACE events have reminded communities that they are not immune to the hazards of a large lake system. And in response to these long-standing challenges, our state continues to commit significant resources to address our resiliency efforts. We know that our communities along the shoreline are the ones most aware of their vulnerabilities. And that is why, at the Department of State, we develop planning approaches like our coastal risk maps. These risk maps reflect the measured vulnerability to flooding, while also provide space for community members to provide their own local knowledge and lived experiences of areas that flood. We also created a coastal risk tool that was so instrumental in identifying areas for infrastructure spending under the Lake Ontario Ready initiative. The tool relies on local perspectives to identify those public assets that are of most significance to communities. When paired with our risk map, it provides a way for communities to start prioritizing the investments they make and where the greatest need is. And at the heart of every Department of State planning effort is community leadership. And so as the coastal study moves forward, we hope to take the concerns of our communities to this planning effort. The results will be a starting point for future dialogue, building on our successes and providing a way forward. And we are committed to an inclusive and equitable path forward. Too often, too many New Yorkers are not included in conversations about their future, our collective future. And as we think about ways to improve how our programs are delivered to communities, we really need to make sure that we're being thoughtful and including underserved, marginalized, disadvantaged, and others who have had limited access to opportunities amongst us. We know the challenges we are facing are not unique. And so we are grateful to be in partnership with the Corps of Engineers and our neighbors, our neighboring states in the region on this extremely important study. Our hope is that we will develop shared knowledge, improved communication, and a common understanding of our way forward. And that together, we can improve the resilience of our communities all along the Great Lakes coast so that they remain vibrant for generations to come. I'm really excited that we're having this event, and thank you so much for having me. I'd like to turn things over to Mike Snyder.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining this afternoon. It's so heartening to see such a great turnout for today's discussion, given that the topic is so important to New York. My name is Mike Snyder. I'm the Ocean and Great Lakes Division Director at the New York Department of State, and I'm physically located in our Buffalo, New York office, which makes me extra pleased to be with you all today to be able to talk about New York's involvement in the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study. Next slide, please. First, I'd like to tell you a little more about the Office of Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure, or OPDCI, where Deputy Secretary Santiago and I work. Our office is where the state's community planning expertise joins with our economic development and resource protection goals to achieve a better and more equitable future for all New Yorkers. You can see on this slide that our mission concentrates on bringing New York's communities forward while preparing them for the next generation of challenges. Just as we hear from our partners at the core a few moments ago and later on in this conversation, a key concept within our work is resiliency. In my time at OPDCI, I have personally seen the potential for climate-related hazards to dramatically alter our coast and our communities around the state. At OPDCI, we work through a variety of programs to enhance community resiliency, and we do so with state agencies, interstate partners, and in close collaboration with federal agencies like the Corps of Engineers. Next slide, please. As Deputy Secretary Santiago mentioned, significant state dollars and broad programmatic activities are coordinated through our office through a variety of programs, each with a specific area of geographic or issue focus. The Department of State, and specifically OPDCI, is the administrative home of the State Coastal Management Program, which has a strong focus on resiliency. A key component of our coastal program is the development of local waterfront revitalization plans. These LWRPs essentially help us tailor our statewide program to meet local needs, including coastal hazards. The LWRP program joins planning and implementation funding to give communities the capacity to envision their future and then begin to make it happen. The LWRP program has a decades-long track record of working in coastal communities to enhance public access and to improve our coastal areas. Similarly, regional programs like the South Shore Estuary Reserve on Long Island provide a local focus and capacity for programmatic activities. The Ocean and Great Lakes program supplements our state coastal management program with policy expertise and a focus on developing regional solutions to some of our most pressing challenges. The Ocean and Great Lakes program helped lead the Department of State's responsibilities in the Resiliency and Economic Development Initiative, or READY, which directed $300 million in state infrastructure spending to help shore up our public infrastructure along Lake Ontario in response to record high water levels. READY was followed more recently by the Coastal Lakeshore Economy and Resiliency Initiative along Lake Ontario. CLEAR, as we call it, focused on identifying non-infrastructure approaches to resiliency, such as land use controls and natural and nature-based features. Beyond the coastal area, our communities planning expertise is a key element of state efforts to promote smart growth, revitalize downtowns and brownfields, and provide planning capacity to communities across New York that is then matched with implementation funding. Next slide, please. With such broad duties and significant responsibilities, our ability to achieve our mission comes from our commitment to a multidisciplinary approach. And ultimately, as with any organization, our strength is in our people. For the Coastal Resiliency Study, we're drawing from a variety of programs and staff with expertise in environmental science, community planning, and regulatory review. In addition to our Ocean and Great Lakes team and LWRP staff, our consistency unit reviews projects based on their consistency with state coastal policies. Their participation in the study will help ensure the strategies and approaches that are identified align with New York's coastal management program. Finally, our GIS unit provides technical mapping support, an important feature of the resiliency study effort. They have a crucial role in our state risk mapping efforts, which seek to identify areas of relatively greater risk of flooding. Collectively, our staff have decades of experience in addressing coastal hazards, and many of us are physically located in the Great Lakes region. Next slide, please. New York's priorities for the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study are fairly straightforward. First and foremost, the state is looking to build on the significant efforts to date in identifying vulnerability and addressing it through targeted investments. This is especially true in Lake Ontario, where New York has invested significant time, energy, and resources with many of you in responding to the extreme high water levels in 2017 and 2019. Collectively, the READY, CLEAR, and LWRP efforts represent hundreds of millions of dollars in state funds that have been spent addressing public infrastructure needs along the shoreline. But just as important as the dollars committed, the effort was based on a risk assessment led by DOS that used a combination of flood mapping resources and local knowledge to identify areas of greatest vulnerability and to prioritize state investments. Both of these efforts included county-level, community-led steering committees that helped identify areas that are vulnerable to extreme water levels. The commitment to local partnership was and remains a key to our efforts in the region, and something we're absolutely committed to building on in Lake Ontario. Opportunities for transferring these and similar strategies to our Lake Erie communities is clearly an area of focus for us, and we look forward to folding that need into the study. Next slide, please. While building on past work, the Department of State also will continue to look for opportunities to integrate new information on how the lakes are behaving into our assessment of community vulnerability. As a first step, we're extremely pleased the study will begin integrating new regional modeling on water level influences. While this won't give us all the answers on how the lake influences are changing, it's an important step in increasing our understanding of how the lakes and connecting rivers behave. This is so critical because the lakes are experiencing change in addition to normal variation. On Lake Ontario, the binational effort to regulate outflows relies on hydrological data and modeling information for decision-making. Even then, our collective ability to manage lake levels is still limited, especially when compared to the range of natural variability. And as the future uncertainty over inputs to the system grows, that potential variability will only increase, without any corresponding ability for us to increase the regulation of outflows. So put simply, our ability to manage the lake levels is limited and will be even more limited moving forward. In light of this variability and the stress it places on our communities, there is therefore a pressing need to continue to identify and integrate the best available information, not just on Lake Ontario, but across our Great Lakes region. And then connecting this information and predictive capacity to our shorelines is the next logical step in creating a more refined and accurate depiction of local vulnerability. Just as the lakes behave differently in different places, the shoreline characteristics are different in their ability to function under these conditions. Next slide, please. And finally, another key priority for us is the use of soft, non-structural approaches to reducing vulnerabilities to hazards. As the study progresses into the development of a risk-based framework, we will continue to work with the Corps and other states to ensure that future solutions to address risk and vulnerability prioritize land use and natural resiliency measures. When properly developed and implemented, these solutions can provide longer-lasting benefits to the ecosystem while still protecting important shoreline infrastructure in an adaptive capacity. Next slide, please. The benefit of being part of an 8-state partnership is that we are not facing these challenges alone and that we have much to learn from one another. Looking ahead to the outcomes of the study, the Department of State looks forward to learning from our peers in other states about the types of hydrological information and the approaches that they are using to reduce risk and vulnerability to coastal hazards. We're also eager to move into the required analysis of information and data that can eventually lead to project identification. We anticipate that the next steps from the Coastal Resiliency Study will identify some of these needs, and that the resiliency workshops will help us hone in on the types of analysis that would be most useful. Next slide, please. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time today. And at this point, I will turn it back to our colleagues from the Corps to provide more insight into how the study will be developed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much, Deputy Santiago, for those wonderful remarks and that wonderful presentation. We really appreciate you partnering with us on the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study. So thank you so much. All right, so now I'd like to turn it over to David Schulenberg, who is the Planning Branch Chief of the Buffalo District of United States Army Corps of Engineers, to the stage. So thank you, David. Welcome. We're looking forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Martin, and thanks everyone. The Buffalo District and the Corps of Engineers in general and New York State have had a long and productive partnership focusing on Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, including significant investment in the shoreline management and lake management and planning. We responded together, as you heard, to historically high lake levels on Lake Ontario in 2017 and 2019. We worked together to plan, design, and construct many projects along the coast, including protecting critical public infrastructure, restoring coastal wetlands, and also beneficial use of dredged material. The Corps of Engineers in New York also have a long history of coordinating coastal development and resiliency related to federal harbors and many civil works projects and efforts along the shoreline. We're looking forward to advancing this partnership and also our shared understanding of opportunities and threats related to coastal resiliency. Those are my comments today. Thanks for the time. Back to you, Dr. Martin.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. Really appreciate those remarks. And so now I'd like to bring back to the stage our wonderful project manager of the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, Mike Padilla, to discuss the study's background. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Akilah. So I mentioned earlier about the missions that we have, the Corps of Engineers on the Great Lakes. Here's a map that shows the Great Lakes, and it also shows the 8 Great Lakes states that border the Great Lakes. And color-coded in there are the district boundaries of the 3 Corps of Engineers districts on the Great Lakes: Chicago, Detroit, and Buffalo. And so the missions that we have on the Great Lakes include navigation, flood risk management, aquatic ecosystem restoration, emergency response, and some of you folks may know us from our regulatory mission as well. And so when you're talking about these missions and the different facilities and things that are related to these projects and facilities, resilience is important to us. And so we think a lot about resiliency, and so you can see how this study is a good fit for the overall Great Lakes resiliency, because we have to be concerned about that for all of these different missions that we have. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the study background. The overall objective of the resiliency study is to protect the long-term economic, environmental, and social value of the Great Lakes coast through proactive planning. Again, trying to be proactive here and looking forward into the future that may have different scenarios depending on what climate change brings. This study is a 5-year effort that cost $14.4 million. It's cost shared 75% the Corps of Engineers federal and 25% state contributions. Again, 5 years that the study started in July of 2023 and will go through October of 2028. So lots of work ahead of us. We've gotten started a little bit less than a year ago, and we really appreciate your contributions to this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. And here's a photo of some photos here of us executing the cost share agreement that allowed us to kick the study off. Next slide, please. The general scope of the study is to do a vulnerability assessment. If you're trying to understand how to be better resilient, you have to understand vulnerabilities of the resources that are out there. We want to identify coastal areas that are already or likely to become vulnerable to future flooding, erosion, and accretion. We want to identify resilient actions to address vulnerabilities and improve resilience and adaptability of coastal resources. Finally, we want to come up with a coastal resiliency plan. So actually, all of this work will work towards a plan so that we can identify strategic recommendations so that we can prioritize future investments and improve coastal resilience. Next slide, please. It's a collaborative approach. I mentioned the 3 districts of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Also, it includes the 8 Great Lakes states, of which New York is just 1 out of the 8. Tribal nations. We've been working with tribal nations. We met with them multiple times since the beginning of the study. We're hoping to get their collaboration and input into the study. Also, federal, state, and local agencies. As you can imagine, resiliency on the Great Lakes involves many, many different types of agencies, federal, state, and local, and we're hoping to have them collaborate and contribute to the study as well. And finally, the public, you all here today, and those that live, work, and recreate on the Great Lakes. Very important for us to have your collaboration and inclusion and contributions to this study as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that as we go forward. Next slide, please. Here's some of the questions that people ask about, what about climate change and how are things going to change? Recently, we had high lake levels in 2020 that caused a lot of concern. And people were asking questions like, my favorite beach? Will it be underwater soon? Or is it going to go away? And I can tell you in Chicago, several beaches got eroded away that used to be there and used by many people are gone now. People ask, how will climate change affect tourism in my town? Will we be losing fish habitat, with fisheries being a very important industry on the Great Lakes? Is my community at risk of flooding when the lake levels get high? What about when the lake levels get low? Is my boat going to bottom out? Are the shipping costs going to increase because of having to light load ships in order to get through low water conditions? And other types of effects that could occur. People are concerned about this and concerned about what climate change may bring in the future. Next slide. This study, the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, is a Section 729 watershed study, which is a congressionally directed study that basically looks at a watershed. The Great Lakes are a watershed, and we do an assessment. That's what the study is all about. We want to, first off, document a shared vision for the study and to take recommendations for actions that can be taken to address identified problems and strategic roadmap to implement recommendations. So I mentioned earlier, if you look at this timeline at the beginning, we signed a cost share agreement that was in September of 2022. After that timeframe, we took several months to put together a project management plan. Now, what that plan does is it lays out the scope of what we're trying to accomplish, the schedule for all those activities to complete the study, and then a budget for each of those activities. And it's a very detailed document, project management plan. It's also available if anybody's interested. And that basically is a roadmap for us to finish the study. And that's how we derive the $14.4 million budget and the 5-year duration of the study, the project management plan. The first milestone in this timeline is the shared vision milestone. And again, that's why we're here today, to talk more about the shared vision. So we're working towards that shared vision milestone. We're hoping to achieve in the late June timeframe. And then once we've moved forward in the study, and remember, we're doing this watershed assessment, we'll talk a little bit about how we are going to conduct that assessment and how the different details about how that will progress. But eventually, we'll come up with recommendations based on our analysis. And so that recommendations milestone is the second milestone. And in order to achieve that, we need to put our recommendations together in a report format and then submit it to you all and to our partners and other agencies to get your input to see if we got it right, or just comment and review on that recommendations report. From that point, then we would move forward to finalizing things based on your input. And then the final milestone is a report milestone that would be hopefully approved and then useful. In addition to the report, will also be some other tools that will be able to be used by the public and by stakeholders and other agencies to help them with their resiliency. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. This is a timeline as well that talks a little bit about, you can see these are the years of the study broken out by quarter. And you can see down at the bottom in the blue highlight there, you have public coordination and update meetings. And so today we are engaged in the New York Shared Vision meeting, which is one of 9 meetings for the Great Lakes states in order to have the public provide input into the shared vision. Also, there's 2 tribal meetings that we've held on the shared vision as well. Going forward, we're going to have study progress briefings on a regular basis. You can see a couple of times a year, all the way through the study, we'll be meeting with you all and kind of giving you an update on what we've been up to and what our results are, that sort of thing. In Q3 of 2025, we are going to have, we talked about that assessment we're going to do, the basin-wide analysis results. We'll have 5 meetings to go over that with everybody, and that actually we'll talk more about the basin-wide analysis here in a few minutes. Moving forward from there, I talked a little bit about the draft recommendations. You can see that in the first quarter of 2027, we'll have that. That includes an 8-week public review period. So everybody will have plenty of time to take the draft report and review it and see, if there's anything we may have missed, or just give us your impressions and comments in general. And so and then continuing on, we'll have study progress briefings, and then the study will be complete in October of 2028. Now, at the bottom of the page, on the left-hand bottom side there, you can click on that QAR code, which would allow you to go to our website, and then you can subscribe. And that's the best way to stay a part of this study, is to subscribe. And that way, that subscription will then alert you in a couple different ways. One is that you'll be getting regular study updates, just do an email blast of telling everybody kind of what we're up to. But it also will then give you announcements of when there's actual public engagements, and some of them will be face-to-face engagements. And so these are a good way is to subscribe, and then you'll be in the loop on this study for the next 5 years as we conduct this study. Next slide, please. And with that, we wanted to, ask for your input into the shared vision statement. And I would like to ask Akila to come back and help us to walk through some of this. Akila?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for going over the study background. We really appreciate that. If people in the audience, if you have any questions, please, as we said before, place your questions in the Q&A. And thanks to those who've already placed questions in there, we really appreciate that. And so now I'd like to welcome to the stage our esteemed colleague, Kara Patello, a planner at the Chicago District of the Army Corps of Engineers, to discuss the development of the shared vision statement. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you so much. All right, so now we're going to kind of get into the main topic of today's meeting, which again is that shared vision statement. And like Mike had mentioned earlier, our goal of building resiliency throughout the Great Lakes is really going to have to be a collective effort. It's going to require a lot of long-term commitment and dedication from everyone throughout the region, really along the Great Lakes coast, to make this happen. And so we're here today because we want to develop a shared vision statement that is going to be a guiding principle as we move through the various stages of the resiliency study. So we're hoping that this statement will really serve to keep us all on track and keep everyone aligned around that common purpose over the next 5 years as we move through the different phases of the study, but also kind of beyond. So thinking about resiliency in the long term. And so we want to make sure that this vision statement isn't just something that resonates with us as the Army Corps of Engineers or just with our state partners. We want this shared vision statement to resonate with everyone who cares about the Great Lakes. And so we're really excited to have you here today so we can get some feedback on some of the statements that we've started to draft to make sure that this statement resonates with you as well. So we're really excited to have you here and look forward to hearing your feedback. So before we get there, I'm going to just quickly talk through how we got to where we are. So how we got to the draft statements that I'll be sharing in just a second. And this process started with a shared visioning workshops with our team. So the resiliency study team consisting of both the Army Corps of Engineers as well as our 8 Great Lakes state cost sharing partners. And so we sat down in the summer and then the fall of this past year, and we had some workshops where we started to brainstorm what makes the Great Lakes important to those that live, work, and recreate along the coasts of the Great Lakes. So we thought internally about, what we thought, and then we extended the conversation to tribal nations during the Bureau of Indian Affairs Midwest Region's Partners in Action Conference last fall. And so we got some feedback from tribal nations as well. And you can see that feedback here on the screen. We got some really great feedback. And you can see here some of the things that came up. So fishing, beaches, tourism, wetlands and ecosystems, important habitat, it's a way of life, cultural significance, an irreplaceable part of the identity of many people and communities throughout the region. And so we looked at all this feedback and we saw these 4 themes start to emerge. So those 4 themes are kind of in these blue boxes at the top of each column on the slide here. And that is resources, recreational opportunities, the natural environment, and intrinsic and cultural value of the Great Lakes. And so our resiliency study team took this feedback and we started to think about it and think about those themes. And then we also started to think about what makes a strong vision statement. So if you're thinking about catchy slogans that are super memorable, we want ours to be kind of like that because it's going to, again, be guiding us through the course of the study over the next 5 years. So we want it to be simple, we want it to be memorable, and then we also want to make sure that it has a clear interpretation. So that's just something to keep in mind as we share these next 3 statements that we've drafted, as we ask for your feedback. So these 3 draft statements that I'm going to share in a second are by no means final statements. They're very much working drafts that we wanted to share just to kind of get the ball rolling, to get your feedback and see what really resonates with you about these 3 statements, and then what you think could be improved or could be made stronger for our final shared vision statement. So like Mike mentioned, we're hosting a series of 12 shared vision meetings total. So we have had already 2 with tribal nations. We hosted 1 with federal agencies, and then we are in the process of hosting 9 public meetings, so 1 in each state and then an after hours meeting. And so once we get through all of the meetings, our team is going to take all this feedback back with us, and we're going to process it and figure out the best way to revise the final shared vision statement with all of this feedback in mind. So I'm now going to share again these draft statements that our team has been working on. And our first draft statement is that our vision for the Great Lakes coast is to improve and protect their ecosystems, recreational opportunities, cultural significance, communities, and economies to be resilient for present and future generations. Our vision for the Great Lakes coast is to support, strengthen, and protect their natural resources, recreational opportunities, communities, economies, and quality of life for current and future generations. And then our third option is our vision for the Great Lakes coast is to ensure a resilient and sustainable future for vibrant coastal communities, abundant natural and cultural resources, and thriving economic assets. And so again, we really want this shared vision statement to be a collective vision. So we're really looking forward to what thoughts you might have on these statements. And so our question is, do these statements capture your vision for a resilient Great Lakes coast? And if they don't, we would love to hear why not. And so again, if there's something in one of these 3 statements that really resonates with you and you think it's really important that we include in our final shared vision statement, we would love for you to put that feedback in the chat. And then if you think that there's a really important concept that we haven't included, or if you think there's any other ways that we could improve on this draft statement, please put that in the chat as well. And if you have any feedback that you would prefer to submit more anonymously, you can send a direct message either to myself, Dr. Akila Martin, or Madeline Dewey, and we will share that feedback. We'll read it aloud to the group anonymously. Or you could put it in the chat in the Q&A and check that box for submit a anonymous response, and we'll read it aloud and share it with the group as well anonymously. So with that, I'll pause and give you a couple of minutes to kind of read through these a couple of times and think about it, and then put any of that feedback in the chat, please. All right, so I see some great feedback coming through in the chat, and I'll just read it aloud in case anyone's joining us just by phone. So just reacting to how strongly each of these categories are intertwined with the others. Something acknowledging this in the vision statements would be important. Thank you very much for that comment. And another one that says, it might be good to make the vision statement more specific to resilience goals. Mentioning threats from a changing climate might be worthwhile. Great comment. And we have a third, very important to note, improve or restore ecosystems as many areas of Great Lakes are in need of restoration. Appreciate inclusion of communities and cultural resources. Thank you very much for those great comments, and please continue to share your thoughts. I have an anonymous comment. Before any other uses that support local economies, the most important impact of these lakes on the lives of people that live along them is the drinking quality of the water. The preservation and improvement of water quality should control any other uses and efforts. All right, and then some more comments. Blind spots for coastal conservation in the Great Lakes have been coastal processes and equity, which are not captured in these drafts. Something we've used in the past has been, we envision a coastal system comprising resilient and ecologically connected coastal sites that provide critical habitat for biodiversity and equitable benefits to coastal communities, is supported by intact large-scale ecosystem processes that drive coastal erosion and flooding, wherein benefits of coastal management actions and policies are equitably considered and collaboration among coastal communities is the norm. Coastal resilience, the capacity of socioeconomic and ecological systems within the coastal environment to cope with disturbances induced by extreme events through absorbing and adapting to those disturbances while maintaining their essential functions and benefits. And then I see a question in the chat as well, which just a reminder to please put the questions in that Q&A function if you can, just so we don't accidentally skip over anything. But the question is, has any messaging testing been done to determine how resilience is understood and viewed? And so I think the answer to that we have now is, again, we're just kicking off the study, and we have been doing that kind of icebreaker exercise that we did at the beginning of the meeting here, where we're asking, what does resilience mean to you? And so we haven't really synthesized and processed all that feedback that we've gotten yet, but that's kind of our first step to understanding resilience across the 8 states, as well as with our federal agency partners and the tribal nations. And then another comment from Tim in the chat. Vision number 2 does not mention cultural resources like the other 2, but does mention communities. And number 3, not all communities are vibrant. We would want resiliency and sustainability principles to apply everywhere. Thank you for this great feedback. Feedback about less buzzwords and more straightforward. Yep, appreciate that comment. All right, so just to check, was there any more direct messages to either Akila or Madeline?
Kara, I did not receive any direct messages related to the shared vision statement, so thank you for asking. Over to you, Madeline, if you received anything.
Yep, thanks for checking in. I also did not receive any direct messages.
All right, so I don't want to cut anyone off. If you're still thinking about it, please feel free to put any of your additional thoughts in the chat at any time during the meeting, and we'll take this feedback with us and again, share it with our other state partners, and we will use it to revise that final shared vision statement. But we have a part 2 to our shared visioning exercise. So on this slide here, you can see a website listed at the bottom, and this is a website that we've set up so you could tell us which vision statement you like the best. So, you know, which one is your top choice. So if you go to this website that's listed here at the bottom, or again, you can use the QR code in the corner to navigate there directly, but the website is GLCRS, that's for Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, .evs.anl.gov/shared vision. And when you get to this website, you're going to see those 3 shared vision statements that I just read aloud, and there will be a box next to each one, and that is where you can enter 1 for your top choice. So tell us which of these 3 draft statements is your favorite, 2 for your second choice, and then 3 for your third choice. And the team will use this kind of data from this exercise in combination with all of the comments that we've gotten throughout the course of hosting these shared vision meetings. And we'll use this information to help us kind of refine that final shared vision statement that will be shared on the study website. And so we're asking that you please only submit 1 response just to make sure that everyone's voice is heard equally. But this poll will be open for the rest of the meeting. So for the rest of the 2.5-hour time period we have scheduled for this meeting, as well as, again, please feel free to put any additional thoughts in the chat or send a direct message to myself, Dr. Akila Martin, or Madeline Dewey, and we will share it with the team. And again, I know this is a lot to think about, so if you feel like you need more time to really you know, think about it and read through these statements a few more times, and if you do and you find that you have additional feedback to share, you can see here there's 2 more opportunities. So again, we have a series of 9 public meetings. We've hosted 7 of them, and today we're hosting this one here in New York. But we'll have 2 more opportunities tomorrow. So we'll be co-hosting a meeting with Wisconsin at 10 a.m. Central, 11 Eastern tomorrow morning. And then we also have an after-hours meeting tomorrow evening. If you or someone you know has a scheduling conflict and outside of the workday works better, please we encourage you to come back to any of these future meetings if you find that you have additional thoughts you want to share with us, or if you know someone, a friend, a neighbor, or a colleague that might be interested in participating in contributing to the shared vision meeting, we would love to hear from them as well. So the full meeting schedule is posted on our study website, as well as the link to join the meeting. And we really appreciate all the thoughts that you've shared so far, and thank you very much for being a part of our shared vision.
Thank you so much, Kara, for that wonderful presentation. And thank you to everyone for providing your feedback to our shared vision statements. Thank you so much. Donna, would you like to make a remark? Or are you ready? Okay. All right. So now I'd like to welcome my esteemed colleague, Jana Potoff, who is the lead planner on the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, to go over the major study tasks. Welcome, Jana.
Thanks so much, Dr. Martin. Thank you all for joining us today. So the next part of the presentation, we're going to build a spreadsheet, a flow chart that's going to walk through how all our different study tasks will inform and build upon and develop the study recommendations. So the Corps of Engineers has recently completed 2 very large-scale watershed studies. One of them along the South Atlantic coast, called the South Atlantic Coastal Study. In this presentation, we're going to be sharing some of the graphics that team developed to help inform what our anticipated deliverables are going to look like, and the tools that we're going to develop. So to understand coastal resiliency and to plan for it, one has to first understand where are we vulnerable? Where are we vulnerable along the Great Lakes? We are very fortunate that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has funded through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative the framework for resilient GLRI investments. The question that EPA posed to the modeling team was, hey, what are the expected range of Great Lakes water levels, wave heights, and ice conditions under a range of possible future climate scenarios? We are very fortunate, the Corps of Engineers, to be working on a multi-agency team. Our Engineer Research and Development Center, the Corps' Engineering Research and Development Center, is working alongside NOAA, Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory. USGS Woods Hole Coastal and Marine Science Center is also a part of the study. Each of the 3 Great Lakes districts are a part of it: the Buffalo, Chicago, Detroit districts, Cornell University, and the University of Michigan. So this work right here, this is funded outside of this core study, and it is critical for, oops, my computer just went blank. Okay, it's critical for us to understand when we're identifying vulnerable areas, what the natural variability of all the Great Lakes, including Lake Ontario, which is managed, all the Great Lakes under this range of possible future climate scenarios, so we can plan for climate change. An important part. So this modeling effort, we are going to have the modeling effort. EPA has funded 2 websites. One that is more geared towards engineers, and then one actually funded through our Engineer Research and Development Center that will be more geared towards the public. Subscribing to this watershed study subscription list, we will be blasting out email blasts once that information, those modeling results, are posted up on those 2 platforms that inform this study. So once we have the modeling information, then we will conduct a GIS analysis. And this is a big picture screening level GIS analysis using basin-wide data sets. We will be overlaying the high water levels from those range of possible future climate scenarios over coastal resources to inform where there might be inundation under climate change in the Great Lakes. We'll also have an understanding and have on the maps, the low water, the extents of low water. We'll be developing a publicly accessible geospatial portal. Here is an example from the South Atlantic Coastal Study as to what the portal would look like. It will be publicly accessible, very user-friendly, and it can be used by all people in the Great Lakes region to help understand what climate change could mean to our Great Lakes coasts. Another reason to subscribe to the project website, is once this information is posted up on this is through our website, up on our website, and this GeoMap in this tool is available, we'll be blasting out that information to all subscribers. So, with the GIS analysis, understanding where those low water extents, as well as the high water that would cause potential inundation of coastal resources, with with our recollection of impacts from low water, as well as our recent low water, as well as recollection of impacts from recent high water events. The Corps, as well as our state partners, will be selecting focused evaluation areas. Those focused evaluation areas will be discussed in detail and a workshop format. It will be a 2-day workshop format. New York will be hosting 2 workshops. Up to 10 coastal resources will be discussed during those workshops. And the goal of those is to understand near-term and long-term action to improve resiliency. One of the questions that we'd be asking coastal managers who participate in these workshops is, what keeps you up at night regarding high water and low water? That will help inform what are the potential consequences that we need to be aware of and begin to plan for. So we'll have our basin-wide analysis with the high water inundation, GIS analysis, low water extents. Then we will have the results of the focused evaluations. All of those will then inform the strategic recommendations. And once again, this is a big picture, strategy for how to produce coastal resiliency in the Great Lakes region. So there will be recommendations regarding what types of studies we need to have, what needs to be monitored. Not only the Corps and our state partners will be included in the list of who should be doing this. It will be the Corps, our state partners, other federal agencies, other state agencies, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, as well as local communities and organizations at the county and the town level. Here is an example of what from the SAC study, from the South Atlantic Coastal Study, but the range of different recommendations that we can see, and include in the resiliency study. You'll see that there's a mixture of who has authority to conduct that action, as well as then are these short-term or long-term works that need to occur. These will form that prioritization of actions by those that work in the Great Lakes region. And so in addition to the recommendations, we realize that we're only able to get out, based on our study budget and timeline, to up to 140 coastal resources. So we're developing 2 other deliverables, to help those who didn't participate in the workshops. The first one is a risk-informed decision framework. Buffalo has created a risk-informed decision framework for resilient shoreline management. With this study, we would be updating that to include that climate focus and understanding of what the steps are to consider that. And then the second thing is a web tool that will walk through at a high level the general steps that one needs to consider when examining coastal resiliency along specific parts of the coast. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jonna, for going over the major study tasks. We really appreciate that. And so now I'd like to welcome back Kara Patello to discuss the basin-wide analysis. Welcome, Kara.
All right, thank you. So the last thing that we have to share with you today in our presentation is we wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the work that we started on our first major study deliverable. So reorienting you on this flow chart, that is the basin-wide analysis, and that's the GIS analysis. That's kind of the foundation for the rest of the study. And so, again, just the objective of what we're trying to accomplish here with this analysis. So we really want to understand that big picture view of how the changing lake levels due to climate change could possibly impact our coastal resources, so communities, infrastructure, and then coastal environments. And so, like Jonna had said earlier, the first step of resilience is really understanding where there are important resources that could be at risk, so that we can then make plans to improve resiliency of these resources. And this first step is really important for the watershed study because it's going to help identify the areas around the Great Lakes that we want to we may want to look at in more detail later on to identify those areas that require a more detailed analysis. And that may be done by us, by the Army Corps of Engineers, by other federal agencies, state partners, tribal and Indian nations, and local communities. And so since we're looking at the big picture for this basin-wide analysis, like Jonna had said, we're really sticking to data sets that cover the whole study area. So all 5 of the Great Lakes, the whole US shoreline of the Great Lakes. And this is to ensure that the analysis is really consistent across the board. So we're not using any state-specific or local data sets at this point in the study. Those may come into play later on. But right now, we really are looking for basin-wide data sets to make sure that we can have an apples-to-apples comparison across all 8 Great Lakes states and all 5 of the lakes. So to do this, the resiliency study team worked with engineers, planners, scientists, and cultural resource experts at the Buffalo, Chicago, and Detroit districts to help us identify coastal resources that we think are important to include in the study. And we also worked pretty closely with our state partners on this as well. And each of the states brings their own unique perspective and insight to the table. And they also, our state partners do a really great job at kind of representing and advocating for what the folks living in their states really care about. And so together we were able to identify GIS data and resource layers for over 100 different coastal resources. So we took this big inventory of all of the data and we started to categorize it into separate indexes. So our first category that we have here is the Social Vulnerability and Environmental Burdens Index. We have a category for Environmental and Historic Resources, and then the Population and Infrastructure Index. And then our fourth index is a combination of all of the resources into one to give that really comprehensive big picture view of all the resources across the Great Lakes. And so once we have these indexes built out, we'll combine them with the hazards. And so for this study and this analysis in specific, we're going to be looking at high and low water levels under that range of possible climate scenarios. So we'll be taking those high and low lake levels kind of on a map and then directly overlaying them with the location of existing resources. And that will help us identify where these resources may be exposed in the future. And so now I'm just going to provide a little bit of more detail about the resources and the data sources that we have identified for inclusion in these different indexes. And so the first one I'm going to talk about is the Social Vulnerability and Environmental Burdens Index. And as we start to think about building resiliency along the coast, it's really important that we're recognizing that there are individuals and communities that are exposed to a higher level of environmental burden or are socially vulnerable, and that these groups and people could be disproportionately affected by the hazards. And so to incorporate this into our analysis, we're going to be using a data source called the Environmental Justice Index, or the EJI for short. And this data source was developed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. And it includes 36 different indicators to identify areas that they consider to be highly burdened. And so their different metrics include considerations about environmental burden. So that's things like air pollution, water pollution, different factors of the built environment or transportation that could kind of affect those environmental burdens. There is data for social vulnerability. So that is things like racial and ethnic minority status, socioeconomic status, housing characteristics, and then health vulnerability as well. So different data and indicators for pre-existing chronic disease burden. And then in addition to that, to respect tribal sovereignty and self-government and to fulfill federal trust and treaty responsibilities to tribal nations. And we also got some feedback today that some groups prefer to be called Indian nations in the state of New York. So apologies, and we'll kind of refer to them as tribal and Indian nations moving forward. So thanks for that feedback. And we will be using the land within the boundaries of federally recognized tribes and Indian nations to be designated as being socially vulnerable in our index. And so for that, we're using this data source, which is the U.S. Census Bureau's tribal census tracts. And we'll be combining these two resources together, and that will be kind of building out our social vulnerability and environmental burdens. So our next index is representing really important environmental and historic resources. And so our first category in here is protected and managed areas. And so we've identified data sources for a number of different special environmental and historic areas throughout the Great Lakes. So that's things like national and state parks, national lake shores, the National Register of Historic Places. We have marine protected areas, important bird areas, critical habitat for threatened and endangered species. So we have GIS data layers that map out these areas, and we'll be incorporating that into our index. And then we also have GIS data for different habitat types, so locating important coastal habitat like wetlands, beaches and dunes, forests, fish spawning locations. We have GIS data showing where these types of habitats are located. And then in addition to that, we have been coordinating, like we had mentioned earlier, with the tribal nations and Indian nations to identify resources that they think are important to share and include in our study to help us better represent the significance of their resources as best as we can. But again, with an analysis like this, it's a GIS analysis, so we also have to recognize that there are limits and there may be important resources to them that we just don't have GIS data for. And so we're acknowledging that there are limits to what we can include, but really working with them closely to try and do the best job that we can of really representing the importance of their resources. And then our third category is the population and infrastructure resource index. And so here we're looking at critical infrastructure. So that includes the Department of Homeland Security's critical infrastructure sectors. We're using that to identify some of these different resources. And so that includes things like power plants, water treatment facilities, important transportation infrastructure, anything that's located along the coast, kind of that nature that could be impacted by changing lake levels. We'll also have GIS data for community resources. And so that includes things like schools, parks, important local economic assets. And then we have tribal resources as well. So we have been sharing maps with the tribal nations to kind of make sure that we're showing the resources within their communities as accurately as possible. And then we'll also be factoring in population as well. And so those are all the resources that we're currently looking at. So like I said, we're still in the pretty early stages of the study overall, but definitely early on in the basin-wide analysis. We just wanted to share our progress to kind of give you an understanding of the types of the resources that we'll be considering in this first major part of the study. But we will be hosting a public meeting in the fall of this year to provide an update on the study progress. And at that point, hopefully we'll have more details to share about the basin-wide analysis. And right now our target date for the completion of this analysis and kind of sharing those results will be in the summer of 2025. So we hope that you continue to stay involved and look forward to having more to share on this.
Thank you so much, Kara, for that wonderful presentation on the basin-wide analysis. And so we have arrived at the questions and comments portion of our meeting today. And as we said earlier, we welcome any and all questions. Please do use the Q&A functionality in Zoom so as to ensure that we get to your question. If you're posting questions in the chat, please repost them into the Q&A functionality so that we can make sure we answer those. All right. And just holding for a breath in case people wanted to get to typing any questions. All right, so I have a few questions already in the Q&A that were answered previously. So please make sure that you check those out. You should be able to see some of the questions that were asked and were previously answered. And if you'd like to have any clarity on those, please go ahead and ask the question again in a different way if necessary, if you feel like that answer did not suffice. And that goes for any future questions and answers that we will go through. All right, Kara, it looks like there's a question for you that says, for the basin-wide analysis of what resources may be impacted / inundated by low water, what area is being defined as coastal? And then a follow-up question to that, is the entire basin being included for flooding analysis, or is it a smaller coastal area? Did I go too fast, Kara? Let me know if I need to repeat it.
No, that was great. Thank you for that question. It's a great question. So for the basin-wide analysis, our study area is really being defined by the extent of where the modeling shows the high and the low water, because we're looking at, like I said, we're overlaying those high and low water levels directly kind of like on a map over where the resources are. And so looking at that overlap. And so our study area is going to be defined by the extent of what the modeling shows under those different scenarios, how far inland the water could go, and then again, how far offshore under the low water scenarios. And we don't have those results yet, so unfortunately we don't have entire clarity on what that extent is, but that is how they will be defined once we get the results from the GLRI framework modeling.
Okay, thanks so much, Kara. I don't know if anyone else from USACE wanted to follow up on that. If not, I'll go to the next question. All right, so Jana, this one is for you. Would changes in coastal erosion rates be included in understanding the impacts of more variable water levels? Welcome, Jana.
Hi. So for that question, our main report will have Jim Seligan, who is a coastal engineer, regional technical expert for the Great Lakes. He will be preparing a summary of erosion generally, based on looking at the range of possible future climate scenario results. To do a erosion analysis, that's a very site-specific analysis, and this study does not include that, does not include a site-specific analysis. That includes modeling to include like a rate. But if there are sites that are selected for the focused evaluations, that erosion is an issue, we will do a qualitative, no modeling, qualitative analysis as to whether erosion may be a concern for that site.
Thanks so much, Jana, for that. Any follow-up? Stevie, if that did not respond in the way that you were hoping, you can definitely re-ask your question or ask for more clarification. Thank you for that question, Jana. Thank you for that response. All right, Jana, there's another question for you. My understanding is that the study would not generate sediment budgets for each lake. Without an understanding of this, can we really get a sense of how our beaches and dunes could be impacted by climate change? Great question. Thank you.
Hello. So there are sediment budgets based on the historic erosion rates that have been completed, and we can put a link as to where those are. However, the erosion rates under future climate scenarios and sediment budgets will not be completed under this study.
All right, thanks so much, Jana, for that. All right, so I have another question. Mike, this is for you, Michael Snyder. Thank you. So the New York State DOS CLEAR plan includes some of this vulnerability assessment already. How will this study build on that? Or will it be focused on other goals along the New York State Lake Ontario shoreline? Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. This is definitely an area that the state is very interested in following up on, as noted through CLEAR, and then also prior to that through READY. We had undertaken some extensive vulnerability assessments, and as I mentioned earlier, that was really done hand in hand with members of the local communities through community steering committees. And so from the state's perspective, I feel like we have good, very site detailed level vulnerability assessments. And this goes back to one of the answers John was just providing. What we're seeing from the coastal resiliency study here is more of a regional perspective at the regional scale data. And so I think what we have at the state will certainly be able to help us align some of that data from the state perspective and understand how the regional data can really help reinforce what we've done at the state level. We're certainly not interested in kind of recreating a vulnerability assessment that was already done, but we are interested in supplementing it. So to the degree that the data sets, the information that's being generated, whether through the basin-wide analysis or through specific data sets that we're getting access to, whether that can supplement the information we have, that's always something we're interested in doing. So there's this supplementary aspect of it that we find very useful. In addition, we do see that there's additional utility in terms of sharing that information, the vulnerability assessment that we've done. So it's kind of that two-way street with the Corps, where we can share the lessons learned that we have. They can have understanding the types of risks that we've seen in Lake Ontario, again, at a much more detailed level than we're likely to go into at the coastal resiliency study scale. But it can still provide some, hopefully some support and some analysis that can be useful in developing that more regional scale vulnerability assessment. And then the last thing I would say, just in answer to that, is when we get to the point of the site selection in terms of that one site or sites that we select for Lake Ontario, that will be informed by the work that's already been done. Absolutely. And I think the other part of it is not just the vulnerability assessments, but also some of the actual infrastructure improvements we've made. So it might give us an opportunity to see where some of those improvements has actually reduced some of that vulnerability. So we'll be looking to areas where we might have a little bit of a before and after, but also where we can absolutely add to the vulnerability work that's already been done and not recreate all of that.
Thank you, Mike. That was a great response. We appreciate the question. We appreciate the response. I don't have any direct messages to me for any questions. Madeline, over to you. Did I miss anything in the chat? Did you receive any direct messages? Please welcome to the stage.
Yeah, thanks, Akila, and thanks everyone for sticking with me through all these links and resources I've been posting. I have not received any direct messages, but I would just reiterate and encourage folks who may have asked a question. It could have been answered via text, so check out that Q&A function. We were posting some resources and responses in there as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline. Thank you so much for all the great work you're doing in the chat, for all the great links and the information, so that our participants are at the ready to know what's happening in their communities. We can pause for a few short seconds just to see if people have more questions. And I can also invite John or Akira if you wanted, and Mike, if you wanted to make any more remarks regarding any of the questions or anything that you may have stated today that you'd like to restate and or clarify or confirm or reaffirm. Welcome.
Hello, this is Jonna again. So we received quite a few comments regarding erosion, and we as the study team realized that this is an important issue along the Great Lakes. This initial analysis is to look at water levels, but as far as potential recommendations for future studies, because that's more of a site-specific analysis, erosion type analysis could be included as future recommendations in that recommendations part of the work. Yeah, just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jada. Mike, please. Mike Snyder, please. Welcome.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say before we close here today too, that looking through the list of participants, I noticed a lot of partners who we've been working closely with, particularly through the Ready and Clear work, but also partners that we would like to work more with. And so I'm very encouraged to see so many folks from New York participating today. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a special shout out to our other state agency partners, folks at DEC, at state parks, and in other programs around the state that have really played an integral role in the resiliency picture within New York. Obviously, being from the Department of State, I speak to our programs, but it is truly a partnership within the state as well as across states and with the federal government. So much appreciated for your participation today. And certainly we all serve as a resource to the people of New York. So if you do have further questions that you don't get to today, you can always follow up with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mike. And thank the Deputy Secretary as well for sharing space with us today and those remarks. All right. I hadn't received any more questions and I don't see any in the chat. So I will close this part of our session out, and certainly the website is in the chat. If you have more thoughts or input, please do send us an email. Please do subscribe to our website. And now I'd like to invite John Hagio, that is a member of our Chicago district in our team, to discuss the next steps. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Akila. So when the study was being scoped out, we wanted to have a local community focus. It's why we reached out to the New York Department of State to not just be our sponsor, but one of our partners into this study, and why we're very grateful to have all of you give us your feedback on our draft shared vision statements. To maintain this local community focus, we included 5 regular study update progress briefings for the public into our study scope. This is going to be, 5 over the next 5 years of the study. This is also the 7th of the 9 public shared vision meetings. 8 of them are hosted by each of our state partners, and you are all invited to the after hours meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30 Eastern, hosted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Next year, we will be presenting the basin-wide analysis results in 5 public meetings, 1 for every lake. And in late summer 2027, we'll have a public meeting for our draft recommendations, followed by an 8-week public review period. So these are a lot of study engagement opportunities to keep track of over a long period of time. So the best way to keep informed with our study is to subscribe to our mailing list, where we send out periodic updates and notifications about future meetings and website updates to the subscribers. We also have a website that has more information about the study, including the schedule of the remaining public shared vision meetings. And once we finalize the shared vision statement, we will post it on the website and alert subscribers on our mailing list. We will also alert subscribers when the results of the modeling is publicly available, and we look forward to seeing you all again in our future public engagement meetings.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending our meeting. I'd like to bring Mike Snyder and Mike Padilla to the stage if you'd like to have some final remarks to our participants, and I thank you all. Welcome, Mike and Mike.
Mike Snyder, go ahead if you'd like to go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say again a big thank you to folks who have been responding. I know we've got a lot of work already underway in New York, and a lot more to do. I'm very excited to see where the study goes, and it's certainly a testament to the partnership that we have so many folks from the Corps joining us here today. And so I just wanted to say a big thank you to the Corps for co-sponsoring this meeting with us. We've talked a lot about Lake Ontario in New York. We're not forgetting about Lake Erie. So certainly stay tuned, and we hope to have some good things in the near future, certainly coming out of the study, but also other efforts that we're hoping to be working on with communities along Lake Erie. So it is a big system in New York, as Deputy Secretary Santiago said. We're a diverse state, and that goes for a lot of different ways. So appreciate everybody's participation today, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, folks, I'd like to echo Mike's statement there, and really appreciate everybody joining in today and helping us out with this. And the remarks about the shared vision are very well, and we'd like to, we're going to consider them as we go forward here. Please subscribe to our website, as we've mentioned several times, and you'll be kept in the loop for updates. But as for that, the presentation is concluded for today. The study team will stick around for a few more minutes in case there's any last minute questions, but the presentation is concluded, and feel free to sign off or stick around to ask more questions. Thanks very much and have a great evening.